Welcome to your deep dive into UK food security. You sent us the 2024 UK food security report, and whoa, it is a lot.
Yeah, it's a beast.
It really is, but don't worry, we've gone through it all the charts and data and
All the jargon,
yes, all the jargon so you don't have to. We'll break it down, give you the highlights and
what it all means for you.
exactly. Okay, so the report says that the UK produces about 62% of the food it consumes. So is that good, bad? How does that compare?
Well, it's a bit more complicated than just one number, right?
Right.
When you look at just things grown domestically, like grains or meats, the UK self-sufficiency jumps up to 75%.
Uh-huh.
But for things like fruits and veggies, that number drops quite a bit, which means imports become,
Really important.
yeah, a really key factor.
Okay, so it's not just about how much food is produced, but also the types of food, right?
Exactly. And to figure out how resilient the food system in the UK actually is, the report breaks down food security into 6 different dimensions. We're talking availability, access, how well the food is used, stability, sustainability, and then this interesting one agency.
6. Okay, so availability, I think I get that is there just enough food to go around?
Right. But then you have to think about access. Who can get that food? Is there anything preventing them from getting the food based on location, income, or other factors? And then utilization. It's not just about having the food, but how is that food used? Are people actually getting the nutrition they need from it?
So it's not just like full bellies, it's about good, healthy diets.
Exactly. And then there's stability. How consistent is the food supply? Can it withstand, shocks like extreme weather or if trade gets disrupted?
Okay, that makes sense. So that brings us to sustainability, which we hear a lot about these days.
Yeah. And for good reason. It's become a central concern. So, how is the UK food system impacting the environment, both here and globally?
Mm.
Are we using resources wisely? What about things like deforestation and greenhouse gas emissions? Big questions.
Yeah, wow. I'm really starting to see how complex this is. But what about that last one you mentioned, agency? What does that even mean when we're talking about food?
It's a really fascinating one. Agency is all about the power that individuals and communities have to actually influence the food system.
Mhm.
So, do consumers have a say in what food is produced, how it's produced, and who benefits from it? Are there opportunities to really shape the system to be more just and equitable?
So, like having a voice at the table.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And that voice can be so many things, from consumer choices to starting initiatives in the community to even, advocating for changes in policy.
So we've got these 6 dimensions. What's the report actually say about how the UK is doing?
Well, it's a bit of a mixed bag. Overall, the UK does have a pretty secure food supply, especially when it comes to just having enough food. But the report does point to some vulnerabilities that we need to pay attention to.
Mm-hmm.
Like climate change is a big one, both domestically and, around the world.
Right. We always see the headlines about those crazy weather events impacting crops globally. How does that all play into the UK specifically?
So the UK's domestic production is unfortunately vulnerable to those same extreme events, right?
Right.
Remember that heat wave in 2023?
Oh, yeah.
Wheat yields just tanked. It was a real wake-up call to how vulnerable agriculture here is to climate change.
So even the food the UK can grow is at risk.
Yeah, that's right. Plus, we rely a lot on imports for tons of our food.
Mhm.
I'm talking fruits, vegetables, seafood. What happens if those source countries are also struggling because of climate change?
It's like this interconnected web, right? Where what happens in one part of the world can impact everything else.
You got it. And you know what? The report uses a really interesting example to illustrate that connection. Bananas.
Bananas. Really? I don't think about bananas when I think about UK food security.
But believe it or not, the UK is one of the biggest consumers of bananas in the whole world. The report even makes a point of saying that if something major were to happen to banana production, like a disease, a pest, even climate change, it would have a huge impact on the UK food supply.
Wow. Yeah, I never thought about it that way. I guess it shows how even simple foods can be vulnerable in a complex global system like this.
It really does. And this vulnerability is not just theoretical, right? Remember that sunflower oil shortage back in 2022?
Oh, yeah, that was nuts. I couldn't find sunflower oil anywhere for months.
Well, that was a direct result of, exports from Ukraine getting disrupted because of the conflict. And the report uses that as a case study to show just how reliant the UK is on specific suppliers and how something happening across the world can suddenly impact what's on the shelves at Tesco.
Okay, so we've got climate change, we've got these global events that could disrupt the food supply. Anything else to worry about?
Well, the report spends some time talking about the resilience of the UK food supply chain itself. It's like that network that gets food from the farms to the processing plants. then to distribution centers, and finally to your local shop. Lots of moving parts, and each part has its own vulnerabilities.
Give me an example. What kind of vulnerability are we talking about?
One of the biggest is labor shortages, especially for those specialized roles. I mean, think about vets, farm workers, even HGV drivers. These are the people that keep the whole system moving. And without them,
It all grinds to a halt.
exactly. And the report is saying that these labor shortages, yeah, they're a real concern for how resilient the UK food system will be in the long run.
So even if we do have enough food, actually getting it to us is another hurdle.
It is, and that's not even everything. The report also looked at how financially healthy food businesses are. A lot of them are showing they're resilient and adapting to these shocks, but investment in the industry still hasn't bounced back to where it was before 2022.
So they're being careful, which makes sense with everything going on.
Yeah, for sure.
So how does all this big picture stuff affect me, you know, day to day?
Ah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? In the next part of our deep dive, we're going to get into just that, how these trends impact you directly, from what you see at the grocery store to, well, what ends up on your plate.
Okay, so we left off talking about labor shortages and the food industry being a little cautious right now. I'm guessing that has something to do with, well, what I'm seeing at the grocery store.
Yeah, you're spot on. Let's talk food prices.
Hmm.
The report flags this as a big concern for people in the UK.
Yeah, tell me about it. My grocery bill has been, like, seriously shocking lately.
It's a common thing we're hearing, and the report backs that up. Food affordability really became this big issue in 2023 when inflation was driving up prices for, well, just about everything.
Yeah, but inflation has hit everything. What makes food prices so, I don't know, vulnerable?
That's a really good question. Part of it has to do with the whole energy crisis, right? Every step in the food system needs energy. Powering farm machinery, processing plants, transporting all the food, keeping it all refrigerated, it adds up.
Okay, yeah.
So when energy costs go up, it's like this ripple effect through the whole system. Prices just have to go up.
So it's not even just the cost of the food itself, it's all the hidden costs to get it from the farm to, my plate.
You got it. Then on top of that, add in all those extreme weather events, droughts, heat waves, floods. They all can mean lower crop yields.
So less supply, higher prices.
Yeah, it's classic supply and demand.
Yeah.
And when you combine those lower yields with the higher energy costs, it's kind of the perfect storm for these price increases.
Yeah.
The report even looks at who exactly is most affected.
Yeah, who is feeling this the most?
Well, it's, as you might expect, lower-income households are feeling it the most. When food prices go way up, it puts a real strain on budgets that are already stretched thin.
Yeah, they have less money to begin with, and then the essentials just keep getting more and more expensive.
Exactly. And that's when food insecurity becomes a real issue. If people can't afford enough nutritious food, well, their health and well-being suffers. And then that leads to a whole host of other problems.
It's like a vicious cycle. So what's being done? Are there ways to help people who are struggling to afford food?
The report talks about some government programs that are designed to provide some support, like the Healthy Start Scheme.
Okay.
Give these vouchers to low-income families to help them buy fresh produce, milk, that kind of thing.
So at least trying to make healthy food more accessible.
Right, but there's a catch. The report also says that not enough people are actually using this scheme.
Why not? If the help is there, why aren't people taking advantage of it?
It's complicated. There are all sorts of barriers. Some people just don't know about it, or they don't know how to apply. Others might feel, I don't know, some stigma around needing help. And for some, the application itself is just too confusing or difficult.
So even when there is help, it doesn't always reach the people who need it the most.
That's exactly it. And the report really stresses that we have to, address these barriers. We got to make these programs more effective and easier to use.
So it's not just about having programs, it's about making sure they actually work, in the real world.
Right. And along with those government programs, we're seeing more and more food banks and all sorts of community food initiatives popping up.
It seems like food banks are, everywhere now.
Yeah. And the report shows the data behind that. Food bank usage has been going up and up. It shows there's this growing need for food assistance.
It's kind of sad, isn't it, that we even need food banks in the UK.
Yet it is. They're like this vital safety net. But the report makes it clear that they should only be a temporary fix. We have to get to the root causes of this problem, not just deal with the symptoms.
So it's not just about giving people food, it's about figuring out, the bigger reasons why they need it in the first place.
Yeah, that's the heart of it. But let's switch gears a bit. Let's talk about another big part of this whole food security thing. Sustainability.
Yeah, we touched on that before, how the food choices we make can impact the environment.
The report really digs deep into that, looking at the UK food system through this sustainability lens.
Yeah.
And there is some good news. The report found that um, the UK diet is becoming a bit more environmentally friendly, at
Hmm.
least when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions.
Okay, so some progress is being made.
Yeah, but the report is clear that there's still a long way to go. It points out some areas where the UK could be a lot more sustainable, especially when it comes to deforestation.
So the link between deforestation and food, I'm still a bit lost there.
Okay, so think about things like palm oil, soy, and even beef. The production of those things is a huge driver of deforestation in other parts of the world.
So what we demand here in the UK, even something like palm oil, is contributing to forests being destroyed, like in the Amazon?
It's a complicated global web, but yeah, our choices here have a real impact in other places. And the report says that we really need to be more aware of these like hidden environmental costs in what we eat.
It's like that banana example, right? Seems so simple, but there's a whole story behind it.
Exactly. It shows how important it is to find more sustainable ways to get those ingredients, and for us, the consumers, to think more about what we choose to buy.
So going beyond just the price, considering the bigger picture, even if it means changing our habits.
That's what it's all about.
Mm.
And while we're talking sustainability, the report also gets into food waste, which is another big problem.
Ugh, yeah, I'm definitely guilty of throwing out like wilted lettuce and stuff I forgot about.
We all do it. But the report says that food waste from our homes is a huge part of the overall problem.
Okay, so what can we do about it? How can we cut down on waste?
Even small changes can make a big difference. Like the report suggests, planning your meals ahead of time, actually using those leftovers, and storing food properly to make it last longer. And of course, composting is a great way to deal with any scraps you do have.
Yeah, I could definitely do better with the composting. It feels like a chore sometimes, but I don't know, knowing it helps makes me more motivated.
It does help. And it's good for your wallet, too. Less waste means you're getting more out of the food you're paying for.
True, true.
But the report goes beyond just our individual actions. It says we need systemic changes, too.
What kind of changes?
Things like clearer food labeling, so there's less confusion about those best before and use by dates, encouraging supermarkets to give surplus food to charities instead of tossing it, even investing in better infrastructure so less food is lost as it's traveling around.
So making the whole system better, cutting down waste at every step.
Right. And all of this ties back to the bigger picture of food security. A more sustainable system is a more resilient system, one that can handle those shocks and make sure everyone has access to good, nutritious food.
Makes sense. So we've covered prices, sustainability, and the choices we make. What other parts of food security does the report get into?
Well, the report spends a good bit of time talking about something called consumer confidence, which is a really important piece of the puzzle, surprisingly.
Consumer confidence, what does that have to do with food security?
It's all about trust. When people feel good about the food they're eating, that it's safe and high quality, it creates this sense of like security and stability. But if that trust breaks down, people start getting anxious, they get uncertain about the whole system.
Yeah, you want to feel good about what you're putting in your body.
Exactly. And the report actually looks at how the public views the UK food system. It highlights the good and, well, the not so good.
What are people saying? Do they generally trust the system?
Overall, yeah, the report found that people do trust those food safety regulations. They trust agencies like the Food Standards Agency.
So we feel like generally things are working okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there are definitely some worries too. For example, the report found that people are concerned about food crime, which we talked about with those Smokies earlier.
Oh, yeah, those are kind of scary. Makes you realize there are people out there trying to, like, take advantage of the system.
And the report acknowledges that food crime, yeah, it can really damage that consumer confidence.
Yeah.
And it stresses how important it is to be transparent about these issues,
Yeah.
to keep the public informed so they feel more empowered.
Keeping everyone in the loop is key.
It is. And building that trust also means being transparent about the whole food supply chain.
Mm.
Consumers want to know where their food is coming from, how it was produced, and who's making money from it.
Yeah, I find myself looking at labels a lot more closely these days, trying to figure all that out.
Yeah, that's a good thing. The report suggests that having more information about sourcing, clearer labeling, that would go a long way in boosting consumer confidence.
So giving people the information they need to make good choices.
Right. And speaking of choices, let's talk about another really interesting part of the report, dietary trends.
What are we all eating these days? Anything changing?
The report looked at all that and found some interesting things. For example, meat consumption is actually going down in the UK.
Yeah, I've noticed that. It feels like there are so many more plant-based options now.
There's a definite trend toward more vegetarian and vegan diets, yeah.
Mhm.
People are concerned about health, the environment, animal welfare. It all plays a role.
So our values are like shaping what we eat, which then changes the whole system.
Exactly. And this shift to more plant-based diets, it has implications for food security. It could mean the demand for certain products changes, which would then affect how much is produced and how it all gets to us.
Like that domino effect we were talking about earlier.
That's it. And the report says that the UK food system has to be able to adapt to all of this, keep up with the changes, what people want to eat, make sure it can meet the needs of everyone.
So flexibility is key.
It really is. And when we talk about what we eat, we have to talk about nutrition. Are we getting what we need even as our diets are changing?
Right. Yeah. What does the report say about how nutritious the UK diet is?
So they use this thing called the Eat Well Guide to figure out how well people are eating. And the results are a little worrying.
Uh-oh. What's the problem?
It turns out that not many people are actually meeting all those recommendations. We're not getting enough of some key nutrients, especially fruits, vegetables, and fiber.
So all that information about healthy eating, and we're still not hitting the mark.
It's tough. And the report says that this could be bad news for public health. It could mean more people are at risk for things like heart disease, type 2 diabetes, even certain cancers.
So having enough food doesn't mean we're eating the right food to stay healthy.
That's a really important point. And it actually loops back to that affordability issue we talked about earlier. Healthy food can be expensive. So if you're on a low income, it's that much harder.
Another one of those vicious cycles.
Yep. And the report really hammers this point home, that we have to address this whole complicated web of things. We got to make healthy food more affordable and get people to eat healthier across the board.
It's about a system that, works for us and for the planet.
That's the goal. As we wrap up this part of our deep dive, it's clear that UK food security is about so much more than just what's on the table. It touches on everything.
Yeah, we've gone from these global trends down to like what we buy at the store, and it's all connected.
It is. And in the final part of our deep dive, we'll explore what all this means for you. What can you do to make the system better, more sustainable, more secure? We'll be right back. Okay, we're back. And I have to say, that was a lot. My head is like spinning with all that info. But I guess that's the whole point, right? To really get into like the nitty-gritty of where our food comes from.
Yeah, it's complicated. And how it all like affects us. But now I'm feeling a little overwhelmed. Like I'm just one person. What can I really do to change a system this big?
That's a good question, and it's a common feeling. But the truth is, even small changes can add up, especially when, everyone starts doing them.
So like, where do I even start? What are the most impactful things I can do just as, a person at the grocery store?
Well, the report really hammers home this point about food waste.
Yeah.
It's this huge problem both for the environment and, our wallets, and we could all do something to cut down on it.
Yeah, I hate wasting food, but it feels like, I don't know, sometimes it just happens. Life gets busy, you forget about stuff in the fridge, and then boom, you've got slimy spinach and moldy strawberries.
I get it. We've all been there. But the report suggests, like, some simple stuff. Plan your meals ahead of time, get creative with leftovers, store things properly so they last longer. And of course, composting is like a lifesaver for those scraps.
Okay, yeah, I can definitely work on that. More meal planning, less impulse buying at the store. And I'll definitely up my composting game. What else?
Another big one is like really thinking about where your food comes from. When you're shopping, look for those products that, have sustainable practices. Support those businesses that care about the environment, fair labor, how animals are treated, all of that.
So like putting my money where my mouth is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And don't be shy about asking questions. Talk to your local shops, read the labels, do a little research. The more we demand transparency, the more these companies will be pushed to, do better.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. Using my choices to like nudge the system in the right direction.
Right. It goes back to that agency thing we talked about. We have more power than we realize.
Yeah.
Our choices really do matter.
I'm starting to see how it's not just about like my little bubble. It's about being part of something bigger and using my voice too to push for change.
Yes. Individual actions are great, but to make real change, we have to work together too. Get involved in your community, support those local food banks, and speak up for policies that support a better system. one that's more fair, more sustainable, and can handle whatever comes its way.
That's really inspiring. It's not just about, like, what I eat. It's about creating a better food future for everyone.
That's the spirit. And remember, food is more than just fuel, right? It's about culture, community, coming together. It's something to be celebrated.
Yeah, food brings people together. And when we understand it better, I don't know, it just makes you appreciate it even more.
Totally. This deep dive has given you the knowledge, the tools to be a smarter consumer. Now it's about taking that and actually using it to make a difference.
I'm ready. This has been so eye-opening. Thank you.
My pleasure. And remember, even those small changes you make, they can have a big impact. We can build a more sustainable, more secure food future together.
And that's a wrap on this deep dive. Until next time, make those food choices count.